Good morning. This is John from the Springs Mennonite Church. I'm here today to share a little more about Joseph. Now, we get near the end of the story here. In fact, today is the next to the last day I have to talk about this guy and the things that happened. And most of what I'm going to talk about today comes from the 42nd chapter of Genesis, beginning with the verse 13 or so. And I'm not going to read all of it because it'll take too much time, but I'll tell it to you. We'll get to the latter part. But when we get to verse, actually a little bit earlier, verse 8, when the brothers come down from Canaan, they've had a famine up there and they don't have enough food. And they hear Egypt has food. Why does Egypt have food? Well, remember, cupbearer had a dream that got him into Pharaoh's court. Pharaoh had a dream that got Joseph into the position of being in charge of it because Joseph was able to reveal to Pharaoh what was going to happen. So Egypt was surviving the famine. But his old family, his original family up in Canaan, weren't doing so well. So the brothers come down and they want some food. And it says here in verse 8, although Joseph recognized his brothers, they didn't recognize him. Okay, now think about this. I'm sure Joseph has changed, and now that he's up in the court, his clothes are different. Uh, Royals in Pharaoh's day were known to wear makeup and their hair a certain way and whatnot. So, and he didn't speak Canaanite; he spoke Egyptian. So I'm sure the brothers really didn't recognize him, but Joseph did. And here comes the story of, I don't want to call it revenge. I'll call it finding out the truth. So in any case, he gives the brothers food, puts a gold chalice in one of them, brings them back, calls them thieves. And he says, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to put you in prison until you tell the truth. So they tell it again. And they say, well, we got our old dad and another brother back home. And Joseph says, all right, I'll make you a deal. You go get the other brother and you bring him to me. Now, this was the youngest now. Joseph had long since disappeared. The brothers know that this is going to be tough because their dad's not going to let another son leave his presence like this. And so we find out that after they agreed to do this, looking at verse 21, speaking among themselves, they said, clearly we are being punished because of what we did to Joseph long ago. We saw his anguish when he pleaded for his life, but we wouldn't listen. And that's why we're in trouble now. Now, here's an interesting thing. They're speaking in Canaanite language. Joseph's listening. But they don't know he speaks their language. So it says, verse 23, of course, they didn't know that Joseph understood them, for he had been speaking to them through an interpreter. Now, when he heard them, he turned away from them and began to weep. Joseph is a changed man. The story started out because he had a dream how his brothers were going to serve him. And taking his coat of many colors and flaunted in front of them, telling tales on them. He was an uppity kid. But after all he's been through, he's found someone else, the someone that God wanted him to be. And he's got a plan. He wants to get all of his family down there. He wants to take care of them. But he knows if he just blurts it out, nobody would believe him. And it still wouldn't get the rest of his family down. Joseph is now a man of great empathy and great caring. He's a man who's gotten his heart right with God. He understands how blessed he is, but he doesn't use that to lord over people. And now standing in front of him are the very brothers who started all this in the first place when they sold him into slavery. I think you and I can identify with this guy, Joseph. We didn't get thrown into slavery. And most of us haven't walked that far away from God. But yet, when we finally find God with truth and sincerity, our lives change. I read recently that if you say thanks to God for something every day for 2 months, you're going to find yourself a changed person. And I believe that. But I also want to say that if you look for God in your world every day, you're going to be a changed person too. Now, maybe you don't want to be a changed person. Maybe you're happy with the way you were. Imagine this whole story if Joseph had maintained that bitterness. What would have happened? Well, probably he never would have gotten to this position with Pharaoh. Because when the cupbearer and the baker forgot about him, didn't tell the truth about what had happened, and he's still stuck in jail for 2 more years, that would have made him a really bitter man. And then when he finally got out, he could have been on a course of vengeance to get even. But he wasn't. You and I can learn from Joseph's life of forgiveness and caring and realizing that all the things that are happening, God's still been there. Realizing that the favor of God was more important than anything else. You and I can live our lives today just like Joseph did. Be a changed person. Find a way to put all those old things aside. How did Joseph forgive his brothers? I don't know. Doesn't tell us. But he did. And if you've got brothers, quote unquote, that you haven't forgiven, well, try Joseph's answer and his solution. See what happens in your life. Thanks so much for listening today. I'll be back tomorrow with the last in this story about Joseph. I hope you'll come back. And hope in the meantime, if you have a need or concern, you'll let us know. We'll do whatever we can as fast as we can to help meet your need. God bless you. Thanks so much for sharing your time with me and being here. Hope you have a really, really great day.